Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. So my favourite racing car of all time is the Porsche 917. I think it's a fantastic looking car, and for the first time in my model car racing history I've actually bought myself one. And here it is. I've only just had it. So I think we can all agree that the Fly car is the nicest looking 917 that's been made so far, but I think we can also agree that the running gear is not so good. So in this video, what I want to do is start to upgrade this car gently at first, and then in later videos I might go a little bit deeper. Now, I'm not looking to race this car to win any podiums or set any speed records. It's just for me, just for fun, just as and when I feel like running it, and most of the time it'll sit in its box looking pretty. So with that in mind, I didn't want to spend a huge amount of money. So I'm going to start with the cheap bits first and try and improve the bits that I can see are the biggest problem with this car, and then later on I'll progress. So the biggest problem that I can see with this car as it sits in the box is the gear mesh. The gear mesh between the motor and the gear is incredibly tight. When you put a 9-volt battery to it, it just feels like it wants to die. The second you take the battery off, it stops instantly and it sounds horrendous. So at the moment it's got a 36 tooth gear with an 11 tooth pinion. So my idea is to come down a tooth on the pinion, so we're coming down from an 11 to a 10 tooth, and I think that might hopefully just back the mesh off a hair. So that's my first plan. If that doesn't work, I'm going to fit some spherical bearings or off-center bearings to it to just ease the back axle away a little bit. Now, with both of these upgrades or changes, I'm not actually breaking anything or cutting anything or doing anything to the car that can't be undone. I can always put the original bearings back in. I can always put the original pinion back in, and just seeing if I can get that backlash a little bit nicer to make it run a little bit free and a little bit more quietly. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to change those two parts, and I'm going to make the bearings though. You could buy these bearings from Staffs. They're about £2.50 for a pair, and they're standard bearings, but with the hole slightly drilled off center so that you can move the axle side to side or up and down or anywhere in 360 degrees, to be honest with you. So you can just rotate the axle around and just play around with the backlash a little bit, and also the ground clearance technically as well. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the bearings if I need to, and I'm going to change the pinion, and we'll see where we are after that. So let me give you an example of how bad this actually sounds on a straight 9-volt battery. It's not that happy, and the back wheels stop immediately. So what we'll do is we'll get this thing apart and we'll start with the pinion gear. Okay, so there's the motor, complete with pinion gear, and what I've got to replace the pinion gear are these slotted 10 tooth pinion gears. Now this is part number, well, PS10 I believe. So we'll take one of those, and for those that don't know how to change a pinion gear, and not everybody does, but I'll just run that through for you in real time. So you need one of these. Some people don't like them, but you know, they work. So get that right. There we go, right there. So wind him in and just gently wind him off, and there we are. That's how you get a pinion off, for those that don't know, because not everybody's been in the hobby for years and years. Right, so here's our 10 tooth. Now what I'm going to do with this 10 tooth, I think, is I'm going to pop it in the lathe, to be fair, because it is a little bit on the thick side compared to this one. It is a little bit thick, and we don't need that extra thickness. And I'm just going to skim it off so it's more or less the same thickness as the original gear. I think the original gear is the same. Yeah, I'll take it down to the original gear, and then we'll come back and we'll get it on the motor. with the pinion turned down, what I'm going to do now is I've got my 20 times loop on for my eyepiece, and I'm just going round taking away the little burrs that have happened on the corners of the teeth. And now what I'll do is, with my Dremel and a brass bristle brush, I should just gently polish those edges. And there we are, all nicely cleaned up, ready to rock and roll. And like I said, it's all been done under my jeweler's loupe to go on my eyepiece. This is a 20 times jeweler's loupe, absolutely invaluable for doing stuff like this. You'd be surprised how much more you can see when you put it under a loupe. So with that done, let's get this pinion back on this motor. I don't always use this tool to put a pinion on because they're a little bit crude, but most people don't have a lathe, so it would be better for me to show you putting on this one. I mean, everybody knows how to do this, but I say everybody, not everybody does, but this is how you do it for those that don't know. See, these tools are a little bit tricky to use. They're not the most accurate, but they do the job. There you go. Keep backing it off so that you get the shaft nice and straight, and you'll notice that eventually the shaft will come to the end and there's a little hole in there, so you want to make sure that when the shaft starts emerging from the gear, that the shaft goes into the hole in your tool and you don't end up binding it up, because that's not good for the armature. There we go. I'll start with there. See, now the shaft is just a hair outside, and as that was emerging from the gear, it was going into that little hole in there, so you just make sure. So let's start with that, see where we're at. So pop him in there, pop him in there, there, like that. There, now we can see that the gears aren't quite lined up. They're pretty good, but they just need to go a little bit more, and I can tell straight away that that gearing is improved, has improved. There's a little bit of backlash in that, which is exactly what I was hoping would happen. Little tiny bit, maybe not so much there, but I can tell you for sure that that gearing has definitely backed off. It's still tighter than I would like to see, but right, so let's just move that pinion onto the motor, just probably another 10th out. There. Right. There. Now, that is spot on. The gear is in exactly the right place. And it's just out of fun, let's just see what it sounds like now. See how much it rolls on now. Instantly better. Still a little bit tight, but a lot better. So we'll move on now to making a pair of bearings. one set of bearings all ready to rock and roll, and there's the original fly one to compare. You should be able to see hopefully that the two bearings that I've made are just a little bit off center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the off-centered part of this bearing so that I can more easily identify it, just with a line. That's two. I think, to be honest with you, I'm going to back it up with a dot of Sharpie as well, just to make sure that I can definitely see it when it's on the car. Okay, let's mount these bearings into this pod. Right, now that's too much, which means we can definitely use these bearings. They're definitely got what we need. So I'll fiddle here for a bit until I get it spot on, and I'll show you what I end up with. Okay, after some messing about, I finally got it about right. So those bearings want to be set somewhere around 7 o'clock, which obviously lowers my centre of gravity slightly and also sets up the backlash nicely. Now when you're setting up backlash, you should also always set it up in quarters. So I'm just stopping this gear from turning, and you could see possibly there's a little bit of slack at that quarter. There's a little bit of slack in that quarter. I can feel it, you might not be able to see it. There's a little bit of slack in that quarter. Again, I can feel it, you won't be able to see it. And in that one too. So the next problem that we've got, not problem, but the next thing to do is just to make sure that these bearings are perfectly in line. I might just ream them, and maybe I won't. No, so just get them all settled in. Get them all settled in. There we are, now they're fine. So that's all fine. They all turn very, very nicely. So what I need to do is set them in. So I'm going to use a spot of super glue just to set them into place. So some people use UV glue. Unfortunately, I don't have any UV glue, so I'm just going to have to go for the old green zap. So a bit of that on my palette, again in the Time Monitor edition. Pick it up on my blade and drop it in just in the top of the bearings there. I know some people are going to be cringing at using super glue. Unfortunately, I don't have many options because I don't have any UV glue. But super glue will do alright. There we are. Right, and because I want to get this video done this week and not sometime next year, I'm going to use a little bit of kicker just to get it to go. So a little dot on there and a little dot on there. There we are, and that will have kicked it off. So now I think what I can do is put a bit of toothpaste on the gears at this point. Now I've got them somewhere close, I'll be able to use a little bit of toothpaste, or a bit of grinding paste in fact. I've got a bit of automotive grinding paste here, and I'll just put a little bit on the gear, and we'll let that run in with a little 9-volt battery for a moment and get that working nicely. All the grinding paste removed with a bit of acetone, and 3-in-1 oil put on the bearings and motor, and a little bit of silicone oil put on the gear. And I'll give you a run up now and see if you can spot the difference. Let's bring it up to the camera. Here we are, and I'll let go the wire now, or not. There we are. That's sounding a hell of a lot better, and it coasts to a stop. So that's that. That is my quick little fix to get this back axle working a little bit better. These gears, they're not the roundest in the world, so I had to find a compromise between tight or tighter and slack. They are a little bit egg shaped, but it's pretty damn good now. So if I hold it in one position, you can see there's a little bit of backlash there, quarter, a little bit there, quarter, not quite so much there, but I can still feel it barely, another quarter, a little bit there. So what I've done is I've taken an average, and now as you can see that is much better. So that's it for phase one. I'll put this car back together again and see you back on the table. And there we are. That concludes part one of upgrading my little Porsche 917. Now I know there are a lot of other things I need to do, like putting in a front axle, sorting out the front guide, truing the rear wheels, truing the rear tyres if not replacing them. But my number one problem was those gears. They were just nasty. But you can buy a whole axle from Slot It for £15.50. Axle, bearings, turned wheels and a gear. Drop it in, good to go. But I'd like to try and make these things if I can. But say, if you can't make the bearings, you can buy them as well from Staffs. They're about £2.50 a pair. They come in 0.5 offset, and you just buy them and drop them in and do exactly the same as what I've done today. And then just buy yourself the pinions and off you go. So for about £4, you can do what I've done. Now the reason why I went down a tooth on the pinion was A, to try and increase that backlash, but also Crow Valley is a very short sprint track. So 11 teeth on the pinion is quite high for me. I needed to just come down, give it a little bit more zip between the bends. So for me, coming down in pinion was actually a good thing, and it also gave me a little bit of backlash. It got me halfway there, and then the bearings got me the rest of the way there, as you saw. And a little bit of lapping in at the end, and we're good to go. Like I say, the main gear on this fly car is not the roundest thing in the world, but it's okay. I mean, it's doing the job now. It's a hell of a lot freer than it was, and I'm sure that it'll be perfectly fine for what I want it to do. So there we are. If you like this sort of content, maybe you'd subscribe, and if you hit the little bell, that'll be awesome. Until the next time, thank you very much.